All right, guys, we're back, and today we are talking about the Civil War again. This time, really more specifically about a couple of important key things here: the Anaconda Plan and the Battle for Vicksburg. So let's start with talking about the Anaconda Plan. This is really a fascinating deal because it's one of the major tactics that is going to be employed by the North, right? How do we win against the South? Now, here's the thing. This is a really good example of what we would call total warfare, right? Or total war. It basically says we're not going to wage war just against the military, but in order to effectively win the war, we're going to wage war with everything that we've got against everything you've got. That means your economy is in play. That means that your workforce is in play. That means that civilian issues it's all at play, right? We're going to use our industry, we're going to use our economy to try to weaken you and yours, because that will hasten the outcome of the war, right? It'll hasten our victory. So the Anaconda Plan is this idea about how to use total warfare. Now, it was come up with by Admiral Scott. And so here's a political cartoon. We see Scott's great snake. This is the anaconda. And the whole idea behind it is we're going to use the Navy of the North. Remember, that was one of our strengths, one of the advantages from the North in my last video. But what we'll see is we're going to use our Navy to blockade all of the coast of the South. And so here we see, I'm going to zoom in here on this. What we'll see is that we can't blockade the entire coastline. It's impossible to have a perfect blockade where nothing slips by. But if we can concentrate on the major ports of Charleston and some of the others that are around here, and then run patrols around the rest of the coast, we can effectively shut down an awful lot, the vast majority of their imports and exports. Remember, the South needs to import food. They need to import weapons. They need to import manufactured goods. They really need to be able to trade their cotton in order to turn that into a profit center for them or an advantage. And if we can shut down their coastline, they can't do it. So this is a really, really big situation here. If we can manage to blockade the coast, then the great thing is it really should bring about a faster end of the war. Now, not only are we going to blockade their Atlantic coast, but then we're talking about using the Mississippi River. If we can do that, then it'll drive a wedge through the South. If we control the river, then that is a huge advantage for us. It would mean that we could attack from the north. It would mean that we could attack with the Navy and insert troops along the East Coast and the southern coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and we could use the Mississippi River to insert troops from the west. It's going to be very hard for the South, that is so outnumbered, to effectively defend against all the possible fronts of war. And so they would have to spread themselves very, very thin in order to do so. Now, this thing works, right? The Anaconda Plan, it takes a while, but it's actually going to work. And so let me show you some evidence of that. And again, I'll zoom in on this. These are the effects. If we look at 1860, right, it would cost, now we would consider these maybe staples, right? The staples of their diet, some things that every household is going to buy. We're looking at, they would have to spend in at that time, $6.45 to buy all these goods. 3 years later in the South, this is not the North. The North's prices may have inflated a little bit, but not to this extent. The South, because they're having to import all these things, and there's great scarcity because of the Anaconda Plan, within 3 years, what they had been able to purchase for $6.45, now it's going to cost them $65.75. Now, I don't know about you, but if my family's food budget, if the staples that we were used to having suddenly went up by over 10 times, that's going to have a pretty serious effect. We're going to have to make hard choices about what we need and what we can have, and cut back in other areas, but it's going to have some dire economic consequences. And I would imagine that it's also going to have some consequences in terms of morale at home, morale with the troops, because they're going to have to do without some of these things as well. So the Anaconda Plan is definitely taking a toll on the food supply, on the sources of food. It's also having an impact on the economy. So the idea here is to kind of force them into submission, even if they're not defeated militarily. Do they have a strong enough economy to withstand this type of prolonged economic attack? And the answer is probably no. So we're going to take a look now at kind of the end of the Anaconda plan here, because it's going to be completed with what we call the battle or the siege of Vicksburg. Very, very important scenario here. Basically, Ulysses S. Grant goes on an offensive campaign down the Mississippi. He's trying to take as much as he can, and he lays siege to the last major fort on the Mississippi that's in Confederate hands. It's the one thing in our way from controlling the entire Mississippi. We already have Memphis up north in Tennessee, and we already have Louisiana and New Orleans. This is the one thing that will complete the control. So he can't defeat them outright. Instead, he lays siege to the city of Vicksburg for 47 days. 47 days of near constant bombardment. 47 days that they can't resupply, that they can't get reinforcements. And after that 47 days, they basically surrender. It's over, right? And this plays a huge role, because what it does is it gives the Union complete control over the Mississippi. And so here we see the Anaconda Plan, the blockades of Charleston and Savannah and Wilmington. We already control New Orleans, but then all the way up here, right, we're able to now insert troops deep into Confederate territory. So control of the Mississippi is a very, very important issue. The other thing that it does is it splits the Confederacy in two, as you can see on the map here, and I'll zoom in again. If we have control of the Mississippi, this really splits Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas away from the Confederacy. Are they still Confederate states? Of course they are. Are they going to be able to take as active a role in fighting this Civil War? No, because their troops, their supplies are all on the other side of the Mississippi, which we have constant patrols on. It's going to be very difficult for them to actively participate in this war in the way that they once did. Now, does that mean no troops are going to make it across? Of course not. There will always be some. But it makes it very, very difficult when we've driven a wedge directly through the heart of the South. So big, big thing here. That's not all it does. One of the more important and often overlooked things is this was led by General Ulysses S. Grant, this entire campaign. And we had such a leadership problem. Our generals were just terrible. They weren't aggressive enough, or they were drunkards, or they were womanizers. They had a lot of different things kind of distracting them from just waging war, win this war. And Lincoln is pushing and pushing and pushing. He needs somebody to kind of take up that mantle of leadership and carry it across the finish line. Well, out west, which was kind of like the minor leagues, right? The major parts of the war were being fought in Virginia and out there in the east. So here we have in the west this General Ulysses S. Grant. But every time Lincoln asks him to do something, he comes through. Lincoln says, take that city. He takes that city. He just is successful time and time again. And so after having completed this siege of Vicksburg and this major milestone, he gets elevated. He was already making a name for himself, but now Lincoln is going, you know what, we're going to give this guy a shot. He seems aggressive. He seems competent. We're going to see what he's got. And so he puts Ulysses S. Grant in charge of the entire United States Army, the Union Army. And so from that point on, we finally have somebody that can, on their own, stand toe-to-toe with one of the most impressive generals that the country has ever seen, and that is Robert E. Lee. So now we finally got the two big dogs facing off, and leadership of the Union Army, of somebody that is willing to absolutely destroy in order to achieve his accomplishments or achieve his goals. So anyway, a big thing to see Grant elevated in that position. The last thing that we see, and this is not insignificant either, is that by capturing Vicksburg, they capture 30,000 Confederate troops. Now that's a big deal because the South is already outnumbered, significantly outnumbered. But when you take 30,000 troops away from the Confederacy, then that takes away a significant portion of your ability to defend and fight back. So these are really very important issues here. I would consider the Battle of Vicksburg to be one of, if not the, major turning point in the Civil War. I have arguments and disagreements, and it's great to kind of discuss these things. Others will have other point of view. A lot of people will say that it's Gettysburg. And I don't disagree, right? They happened, it's kind of 1A and 1B, one in the East, one in the West. Both of them had enormous consequences for the Confederacy. But for my money, it's the elevation of Grant. It is the completion of the Anaconda Plan that really puts the screws to the South. So, anyway, with that said, thanks for watching. Leave me any comments. Please go ahead and subscribe and be looking for more videos coming up later this week. Thanks, guys.